When Marcus was stopped by the police at his own front gate, he didn't shout or argue. He simply made one phone call that turned the entire situation upside down. Marcus Thompson was exhausted. His hands still carried the faint scent of asphalt and sawdust, and his boots were caked with dry dirt from the construction site. He had been working it all day. The sun had dipped behind a cloud an hour ago, leaving a dull gray light washing over the winding road leading to his gated community in Maplewood, New Jersey. All he could think about was a hot shower and the lasagna his wife, Angela, had promised was waiting for him. As he pulled his dark blue Ford F-150 into the driveway, he noticed the squad cars. 2 police vehicles parked sideways in front of his gate, like a blockade. Their headlights were off, but both engines were running. Confused at first, Marcus thought they must be there for someone else, perhaps a neighbor. But as he got closer, one of the officers stepped out and raised a hand. "Stay in the vehicle, sir," the officer said, his voice firm. Marcus leaned out the window and gestured toward the gate. "This is my house. I'm just trying to get in." "You live here?" the officer asked, his tone flat. "Yeah," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. "I built this house." The second officer, taller with a buzz cut and a stern jaw, stepped out as well, resting a hand near his belt. Marcus noticed the glint of the badge on his chest. The first officer, who was doing the talking, was younger, perhaps in his late 20s, and his nameplate read, Officer Collins. "We received a call about a possible break-in," Officer Collins said, scanning Marcus from his boots to his baseball cap. "Mind showing some ID?" the taller officer asked. Marcus reached into his breast pocket slowly. "Not a problem." He handed over his driver's license, which clearly listed the address just beyond the gate. Officer Collins examined it for a few seconds before turning to his partner. They didn't move to let him in. Instead, they stood there, suspicion hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. "Look, you can check the mailbox, the gate sign. Hell, my name is etched in the plaque next to the intercom," Marcus said, frustration creeping into his voice. Officer Collins didn't respond. He looked down at the license again, then back at Marcus, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. Suddenly, the front door of the house creaked open, and a figure stepped out onto the porch, waving. "Marcus, is everything okay?" Angela's voice cut through the tension. Behind her, their daughter Zoe, 15 and already taller than her mom, walked out barefoot, holding her phone. Angela was still in her work scrubs, and she looked between the officers and Marcus, eyes narrowing. "That's my husband. You got a problem, take it up with me." The officers shifted slightly. Officer Collins handed the license back, his expression unreadable. "We were just responding to a report, ma'am. Just doing our job." Angela didn't blink. By blocking his own driveway? Officer Collins didn't answer. Instead, he turned and nodded to his partner, and both walked back to their cruisers without another word. Marcus finally punched in the gate code, and the black iron door slid open slowly. As he drove through, he didn't say anything. Neither did Angela. Zoe just looked down at her phone, tapping the screen quickly. He parked in front of the garage, but didn't turn off the engine right away. "Are you okay?" Angela leaned into the window. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "I don't know yet." Inside, he peeled off his boots by the door, sat on the edge of the ottoman, and stared at the floor. The kitchen smelled like lasagna and garlic bread, but he wasn't hungry anymore. Zoe walked in, holding her phone. "I recorded everything," she said, from the moment they stepped out. Marcus nodded slowly. "We'll talk about it in the morning." But that night, he barely slept. Something inside him wouldn't let him settle. It wasn't just about what happened. It was the fact that it could happen again, that in his own driveway, in front of the house he designed and built with his own hands, he still had to prove he belonged. The incident didn't end there. Marcus was up before the sun, the weight of what happened tonight before pressing into his chest like a heavy stone. He watched the ceiling fan spin above their bed until the room turned gray with morning light. Angela stirred beside him. "Did you get any sleep?" she mumbled. He shook his head, rubbing his face. "Not really." By 6:30 a.m., he was standing at the kitchen counter, coffee mug in hand, staring at the security monitor. He replayed the footage again, this time with the volume turned up. There was no shouting, no threats, nothing outrageous. Just him, calm, respectful, cooperative. Still, they treated him like he didn't belong, like a stranger trespassing on his own land. Angela walked in, hair tied up, wearing a hoodie and sweatpants. She opened the fridge, pulled out a carton of eggs, and started cracking them into a bowl. "What are you going to do?" she asked, not looking at him. "I'm calling that patrol company," Marcus said, his jaw tight. "They're the ones that made the call. They didn't even check the cameras. Just assumed I was up to no good." Zoe wandered in behind them, already dressed for school. She grabbed a granola bar and sat at the bar stool, watching her dad closely. "You gonna post a video?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. "No, not yet." Angela glanced up. "But we are keeping the footage." "Damn right we are." Marcus replied, 8 a.m. sharp. Marcus called Maplewood Community Patrol, the private firm contracted by their HOA to monitor the gates and patrol the neighborhood. A cheerful receptionist picked up. "How can I help you today?" "I need to speak to whoever's in charge of dispatch," Marcus said flatly. "This is Marcus Thompson from Maplewood Estates." There was a short hold. Then a deeper voice came on the line. "Mr. Thompson, this is Ben Lunsford, head of operations. I understand you had an incident yesterday evening. I was actually just about to call you," Marcus said. "You had 2 officers blocking my driveway with their hands on their guns. You want to explain how that happens without a damn ounce of verification?" There was a pause on the line. "We received a call from one of our team members who said they spotted suspicious activity near your gate. A male subject unknown to them loitering." "You mean me, the homeowner?" Marcus snapped. "I understand now, yes. Our patrol didn't recognize you, and because he didn't bother checking security feed or checking his records," Marcus interrupted, "he saw a black man in work clothes and made a judgment call. I assure you we're reviewing our procedures. This isn't how we want our relationship with the community to look." Marcus laughed bitterly. "There is no relationship, not anymore." Another pause. "Are you saying you're terminating your contract with us, Mr. Thompson?" "I'm not saying it," Marcus said. "I'm doing it right now. As of this moment, sir, if we could meet to discuss." Marcus hung up. Angela, now sitting at the kitchen table with her half-eaten eggs, raised an eyebrow. "Is it done?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'll be calling the HOA next." He walked to his home office and pulled up the HOA agreement. After a few more calls and a tense but brief conversation with a board member named Greg Stanford, who seemed far more concerned about neighborhood image than Marcus's safety, he made it official. He would no longer contribute a single cent toward a firm that treated him like a threat. BY noon. The word had started to spread. A friend of Angela's texted, "Saw what happened. That was you? Just watched it on a neighborhood Facebook post." Then a co-worker of Marcus's sent a message, "Brother, that video is making rounds. You handled that better than I would have." Marcus furrowed his brow and turned to Zoe. "Did you post it?" She shook her head. "No, but I sent to Mia." "Maybe she did," Angela said, raising an eyebrow. "Your friend Mia?" "Yeah," Zoe said. "She's got like 12,000 followers on TikTok." Marcus chuckled. Well, damn. He wasn't mad, not really. Part of him was glad it was out there. The other part was anxious because he knew once the internet got hold of something like this, it wasn't just a video anymore. It became a conversation, and sometimes those conversations took on a life of their own. Marcus thought it might blow over quietly, but a knock at his door that evening would shift everything. By 4 p.m., the comments were piling up faster than Marcus could read them. The footage, less than 2 minutes long, had been clipped, watermarked, and reposted on at least 3 platforms. Zoe's friend had added a title to the TikTok upload. Man blocked from entering his own house. Guess why? It didn't need much more. People were furious and curious. Some recognized the location. Others debated whether it was real. A few pushed back, saying there had to be more to the story. Marcus sat on the couch scrolling, half drained, half on edge. Angela stood behind him, arms folded, reading over his shoulder. Some of these comments, she said, people don't even know you, and they're out here making up stories. I'm used to that, Marcus replied. People like stories that fit what they already believe. A knock came at the door. 3 firm raps. Marcus stood up slowly. You expecting anybody? Angela shook her head. Zoe peeked around the corner from the hallway. Marcus opened the door to find a woman in her late 60s holding a plastic container in both hands like a peace offering. Her gray hair was pinned neatly in a low bun, and she wore a light cardigan over a blue dress. Her eyes looked tired but direct. Marcus, she said, can I talk to you a minute? He recognized her face. She lived 3 doors down. They always waved politely, but they'd never had a real conversation. Sure, he said, stepping back slightly. I brought some peach cobbler, she said. It's still warm. Thanks, Angela said from the living room, watching with wary eyes. That's kind of you. I'm Margie Klein, the woman said, glancing between them. I saw the video, and I need to say something. Marcus didn't reply. He just nodded once, his face unreadable. Margie looked down at the container in her hands. I was the one who called the patrol company. Angela sat up straighter. You called on my husband? I saw someone at your gate from my kitchen window. Margie stammered. I didn't recognize you at first. You were wearing, I don't know, work clothes, and it was getting dark. Marcus blinked slowly. You didn't recognize me? I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean for it to become what it became. I didn't think the response would be like that. Angela stood now. You called on my husband because he looked... What? Tired? Dirty? No, Margie said quickly. No, He looked unfamiliar. I've lived here 6 years, Marcus said. I've been to 3 HOA meetings. I've waved at you and your husband at least a dozen times. You think I'm unfamiliar? Margie's face turned red. I wasn't thinking clearly. I saw movement and maybe I panicked. Zoe came down the hallway now. You panicked because he's black? She said, her voice sharp but quiet. Margie's eyes glistened. I don't want to believe that's what it was, but maybe somewhere in my mind I did. I'm not proud of that. I came here because I needed to say it out loud. Marcus looked away. The room was so quiet you could hear the humming from the fridge behind them. I didn't ask you to come, he said, but I appreciate that you did. Margie placed a container on the kitchen counter, her hands shaking slightly. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Really? Then she turned and walked out, leaving the front door slightly ajar. Marcus stood there for a long moment, his mouth pressed tight. Angela moved to his side. You good? I'm not sure yet, he replied. But that's the second time in 24 hours someone's tried to explain away how they see me. He picked up the cobbler, looked at it, then set it down again. That night, the video hit 500,000 views. Local news stations called, asking if Marcus would agree to an interview. Even someone from a national outlet left a voicemail. Angela sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Do you want to say something publicly? I don't know, he said. Feels like whatever I say, someone's going to twist it. But if you say nothing, she said, people will decide for you. He didn't answer. He looked out the window instead, toward the gate. But silence wasn't going to be an option much longer. Not after what showed up in his mailbox the next morning. The envelope was thick, unmarked, and wedged sideways in the mailbox like someone had shoved it in a hurry. Marcus turned it over twice before opening it. No return address, just his name written in crooked black ink across the front. Inside was a printed screenshot from the video, his face taken mid-conversation with Officer Collins, clearly zoomed in from the footage that had gone viral. Someone had circled his image in red marker and scrawled across the bottom, "Don't forget whose neighborhood this is." Marcus stood still in the middle of the driveway, gravel crunching under his boots as he slowly folded the paper again. Neat, not torn, just folded once, clean and sharp. He looked up toward the street. Nothing out of the ordinary. A jogger passed on the sidewalk across the road. A white SUV drove by slowly. Turned the corner. Nothing suspicious. But the cold settled in his chest anyway. Inside, Angela was wiping down the counter, and Zoe was upstairs getting ready for school. Marcus laid the envelope on the table like it was something toxic. "What's that?" Angela asked. He didn't speak, just slid across to her. She read the note, her hand gripping the counter. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he replied. She looked at him hard. You think this came from that security company? Could have been anyone, Marcus said. Could be someone on that HOA board. Could be a neighbor. You think it was her? Angela asked, referring to Margie. Marcus shook his head slowly. No. She was scared, nervous. This is bold. Whoever this was doesn't feel like they made a mistake. They feel entitled. He glanced toward the door again. They want me to feel watched, to feel out of place. Angela's mouth tightened. We need to file a report. With who? Marcus said. Same department that sent Collins and his partner to block my driveway. She exhaled, no words, just an understanding between them. The kind of moment where trust in systems felt more like wishful thinking than logic. Later that afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message from a neighbor named Terrence McLean, who lived 2 blocks over. Just so you know, there's a thread in the neighborhood Facebook group. They're talking about organizing a vote to reinstate the patrol contract. Some folks saying you're overreacting, saying you're making things worse. Marcus called him immediately. Terrence, he said, you believe that? I don't, Terrence said. But you know how some of these folks are. They think if they've never seen a problem, it must not exist. Marcus rubbed his temples. What do they want? For me to just let it go? Yeah, Terrence said. They want you quiet, calm, grateful. Marcus laughed bitterly. Grateful for what? For being investigated on my own property. Terrence sighed. I'm just giving you a heads up. They hung up, and Marcus sat in his office. Blinds cracked slightly, staring out at the manicured lawns and trimmed hedges that lined the cul-de-sac. This was supposed to be the dream, the payoff for years of sweat, long nights, busted knuckles, and bounced checks. He built houses, spent years helping other people design their futures, and when it was finally his turn, he chose his place. Good schools, quiet streets, tree-lined sidewalks, the kind of place where you'd expect to feel safe. But here he was, questioned at the gate, threatened by mail, and now painted as a villain in some twisted version of neighborly order. Zoe came downstairs and found him still sitting in the same spot. You okay, Dad? She asked. He looked up at her. You remember when we first moved here? He asked. She nodded. I was in 4th grade. You were so excited to pick your room. You made us paint it purple. She smiled. Yeah, and then changed it to green 3 months later. He leaned forward. I want you to understand something. Everything I've ever done, everything your mom and I worked for, it wasn't just for comfort. It was to prove something, that we could live where we want, how we want, that we didn't need permission. Zoe sat on the arm of the couch beside him. You don't need to prove anything, Dad. Marcus nodded slowly. He pulled the folded note from his pocket and stared at it one more time. But just as he was thinking about keeping quiet, a phone call later that night made silence no longer an option. The call came just before 10 p.m. Marcus had just finished locking up the back sliding door when his phone rang, vibrating hard against the countertop. He didn't recognize the number, but something in his gut told him to answer. Mr. Thompson, the voice said, breathy and sharp. You don't know me, but I saw the video. I just want to say thank you. Marcus paused, unsure. Who is this? I live across town in Brookfield. I'm not in your neighborhood, but I've had something like that happen too. Twice. I just never got on camera. Watching you stay calm like that, it meant something. So, thank you. Then the line went dead. Marcus stood there for a second, stunned. The call had lasted less than 30 seconds, but it carried weight. He looked over at Angela, who had just come down the hallway in her robe. Everything all right? She asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, just unexpected. But that was only the beginning. Over the next 3 days, the video reached over 1.3 million views across different platforms. A local reporter from KPRC2 News reached out and came by to do an interview. In their living room, Marcus spoke calmly, focusing on what happened without spinning into anger. He didn't want to be a symbol. He wanted to be heard. Still, not everyone appreciated his voice. Flyers started showing up in neighbors' mailboxes and signed, printed on cheap white paper, accusing Marcus of dragging the community into drama and putting the neighborhood's reputation at risk. One even suggested he'd stage the whole thing for attention. Terrence texted a photo of one. "This is some straight-up coward stuff," he wrote. Not even brave enough to put a name on it. Marcus tried not to react, but then Angela got a message from her job. The hospital HR department wanted to meet just to go over some policy concerns after a patient's family member said they recognized her from the internet. That's when Marcus had had enough. "I stayed calm, I stayed respectful, and I'm still the problem," he said, pacing the living room. "People don't want the truth, they want quiet," Angela said, "because once you speak, they've got to see what they've been ignoring." Marcus stopped pacing. "I think I need to go to that HOA meeting." Angela raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm just going to sit in that room and make them look me in the face." That Sunday, he dressed in pressed slacks and a collared shirt. Not to impress, just to avoid giving them any excuse to shift the focus. The meeting was held in a small rec room off the clubhouse. About 25 residents sat on folding chairs, some familiar faces, some who barely glanced up as he walked in. Greg Stanford, the HOA president, stood behind the folding table in the front. His voice faltered for a moment when he saw Marcus enter. After the regular agenda items, lawn maintenance, pool hours, a brief update on upcoming repairs, Greg cleared his throat. "I think we should address the recent public attention brought on by the events of last week." Marcus raised his hand. "Can I speak?" A few heads turned. Greg nodded. Marcus stood slowly. "I'm not here to call names. I'm here because I believe in this neighborhood. That's why I moved here. That's why I raised my daughter here. But what happened at my gate wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a statement. A loud one." He scanned the room. "The moment I'm seen in work boots and a flannel shirt, I stop looking like I belong. That's a problem." One woman in the second row shifted uncomfortably. A man in the back, who hadn't even glanced up during the meeting, suddenly locked eyes with him. "I'm not asking for pity," Marcus continued. "I'm asking for honesty about how we see each other, about what happens when the people meant to protect us turn on us based on nothing more than a glance." Silence. Someone coughed. Greg forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We'll take your comments into account." Marcus nodded, then sat as the meeting adjourned. A few residents approached him. Some shook his hand. Others avoided him entirely. But one man, Brian Minter, a teacher at the local high school, stayed back. "You ever think about coming to speak at the school?" he asked. "Might do some good." Marcus hadn't, but he said he'd think about it. But before he could even consider it, someone else from his past would show up uninvited, with a memory that would stir up something deeper than anger. It was a muggy Wednesday evening when Marcus found himself back at the Maplewood Estates clubhouse, not for an HOA meeting, but for something larger. The HOA board, under pressure from residents and the growing media attention, agreed to host a town hall open to the entire community. People wanted to talk, or at least be seen talking. Marcus didn't want to go, not at first, but Angela insisted. "You've come this far," she said. "Say what they don't want to hear and say it clear." So he went. Zoe stayed home, texting him just before he walked in. "Don't let them talk over you, Dad." The room was packed. Folding chairs filled every row, and still, people stood along the back wall. Local news outlets were there too, cameras quietly stationed near the exits.